as eating disorder dietitians, we can villainize other types of foods that are sort of quote unquote health foods, right? Like, no, eat the pasta, not the quinoa, that sort of thing. I think we need to be a little careful about that as well.
Hello, welcome to the Seasoned RD, a podcast connecting newer professionals in the field of eating disorders
to those of us who have been around for a while. I'm your host, Beth Harrell, a certified eating disorders registered dietitian and supervisor.
And I'm Abby Brown, a registered dietitian who is newer to the field.
I think of myself as a well-seasoned cast iron skillet with wisdom and experience, yet always ready for something new.
And I think of myself as an Instapot with innovation and a fresh perspective. This podcast brings both to the table to share ingredients, recipes, and techniques of past and present so we can all be our best for the future.
The kettle is heating up. The skillet is on simmer. So join us around the table for true professional nourishment. Abby, ready to stir the pot?
Let's do it.
So you know how you just kind of click with people and all levels of seasonings, and Alex is kind of a mid to early level seasoning, but she has this. She is such a great EDRD. She lets us know as dietitians, people often show up in our offices for a meal plan for weight reasons. And, it's often related to worry about actual or perceived potential for chronic illnesses like diabetes or GI concerns. And this gives us a chance to talk about the why, a place for them to tell their food story. And for Alex, it's much more fulfilling for myself as well, for you and your client, than just handing out a meal plan or calculating calories. So she shares with us her 3 steps to eating more simple carbs and embracing both Cheetos and kale so we don't villainize foods also that might be considered health foods. So language does make a difference, and we are really glad to have Alex with us today, and I hope you enjoy her episode as well. Hello. Today we are here with Alex. Oh gosh, I didn't ask you how you pronounce your last name.
It's Georgiadis.
Georgiadis. Okay.
Yeah.
We're here with Alex Georgiadis, and we're really excited to have you, Alex. There is the whole idea of this podcast is to bring in people who are newer in the field to people who are more experienced, and all along the spectrum, even interns, grad students, people who are just interested in listening for the first time. All levels of experience are going to be something that they learn from.
It's great. Yeah. This is such a great podcast, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, like Beth said, I'm so excited to have you, especially a fellow outpatient RD. We love connecting with everybody here, but definitely can resonate a little more with another outpatient RD. So to get us going, mountains or beach?
Oh, beach. Yeah.
I was expecting you to say mountains being in Colorado.
Well, anywhere where it's sunny for me, right? So Colorado's definitely sunny. But, when you think of the beach, you think of the sun and the warmth. So definitely beach. Yeah.
Wow. I'm a mountain girl, and so I'll come visit you anytime. I have come to visit you actually before.
You have.
And
yeah.
I loved it.
And maybe someday I'll live near the beach. I have before. I used to live in Los Angeles. Maybe someday again.
Okay. And then for the next one, breakfast or dinner?
Ooh, that's tough. Dinner. Yeah, dinner, just, anticipating that kind of wind down at the end of the day and, family together and having a big dinner. But that's a hard one because it just, breakfast is awesome too. That's a tough one. Yeah.
It is a tough one, but a lot of people really do appreciate, it's not necessarily the food, it's the time together when it's dinner, because you're winding down, like you said.
You're connecting a little more. Breakfast is a bit more of a solo affair for me.
It can be. Yeah, me too, for sure. Yeah. And weekends and weekdays are different. We know that as dietitians when we're taking our 24-hour recalls or whatever, and we're asking.
That's right.
or whatever their schedule may be. Okay. Yeah. Audiobook or paper book?
Paper. Yeah, I'm definitely more drawn to just grabbing and holding the pages, reading the book. But I do think I would probably read more books if I did audio, so transitioning to audio would probably be a good idea. wanting to embrace that a little more. I used to reject that concept and think I was appalled by it. Right. But yeah, I'm starting to understand, the benefits of audiobooks for sure. But yeah, I'd pick paper.
When you said that, Alex, it reminded me of my mom when microwaves came out, and she was just like, no, we can't. That's just like well, I'm going to go ahead and use the saucepan on the stove to reheat things. And of course, eventually she came around to it. But that's also part of this podcast is the picture that Abby and I have is I'm using my mom's encyclopedia. It's all torn and used and got food all over it. I mean, it's been loved and used. And she's on her phone or her computer looking up recipes. And so, the whole idea of audiobook is newer, but do you have a commute to work?
No, I'm well, right now I'm actually still fully remote.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and my commute was quite short. So
that audiobook wouldn't work in that scenario.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So for those of you who are listening in, I want to ask Alex, what do you remember, any story about exam day? You're a registered dietitian. And do you have any stories from that day or from around that time?
Oh gosh, for me, it's interesting. I didn't take the exam until you had a year after you finished the internship. And I had a baby in that time. I was pregnant during my internship. And I had a baby, and I went right up until, embarrassed to say, almost that deadline.
Oh my gosh, I would have been so anxious.
It was, so I thought, but I remember that day, I was still kind of in the middle of nursing, and it was all kind of a blur, sleep deprived, new baby. So that was kind of what those are the images that I think of when I think of the RD exam. But I just remember going in thinking, oh gosh, I'll be so annoyed if I don't pass this thing,
And it was computer, or was it pencil and paper?
It was computer. Yeah.
Okay.
And it wasn't so bad. I remember feeling like, that wasn't so bad. And yes, luckily I passed, and that was exciting. And for me, it was kind of like, okay, moving on. Now I can move on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Well, good. That didn't sound too bad, but I would have been so anxious thinking, I'm going to forget everything that I learned.
I know. Yeah, that is true. And it did make it harder. It did make studying harder. It's not something I recommend doing, waiting that period of time. But that's just kind of how the cards fell for me, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, tell us how you got into the field of dietetics, and then how you got into the field or the area of eating disorders.
Sure. Yeah. It wasn't intentional, the eating disorders, but, kind of going back how I got into dietetics, it wasn't something on my radar when I went to undergrad. I really didn't quite know what I wanted to do career-wise, randomly double majored in economics and English because those were interesting subjects to me. And I didn't go back to grad school for a while. I moved to Los Angeles. I'm originally from Michigan, went to the University of Michigan undergrad, moved to Los Angeles, ended up being a preschool teacher over there, and knew that it wasn't something I wanted to do forever. And, while I was an undergrad, toward the end of undergrad, I had randomly listening to Tony Robbins. I guess it may have been an audiobook, actually, now that I'm thinking of it. And he, mentioned something about nutrition, the connection between nutrition and health and energy and how you feel. And that was like a light bulb in my head about thinking about, health and nutrition. And then it just was on my radar, and I was very interested in the topic of nutrition. And it wasn't until I was living in LA and thinking about, kind of what my next move was going to be, I realized, I would sometimes go to bookstores and peruse books, and I would always go to the nutrition section, and I was kind of a nerd about it and reading, nutrition books. And I thought, gosh, if I was spending, just my extra time on this, why don't I actually do something, make a career out of it? So I did a little research and learned about the different things I could do and being a registered dietitian, and applied to the School of Public Health at the University of Michigan. They had a nutrition program, and that's how I got into nutrition.
That's so great. the more that Beth and I ask this question, the more that we realize not everybody has this like straight and narrow right into school, immediately know you want to be a dietitian. From there, how did you get into eating disorders?
Right. So, originally I was really interested in, chronic disease management, disease prevention. And so once I passed my, RD exam and everything, I actually didn't go into a job that was specifically dietetics related. It was in the field of wellness. I worked at a senior living community. It was both independent and assisted living. And I did, some help, at the corporate office with wellness programs. I even, ran a community. And then from there, I actually worked with a private practice doctor, very part-time. He had, I'm trying to think, like an acupuncturist in his office and, other services. And he was looking to work with a dietitian. And so very part-time, I would do one-on-one counseling with some of his patients. And some of them had eating disorders. And I did have some exposure to eating disorders during my internship as well. I didn't have an internship in an eating disorder clinic necessarily, but, one of my preceptors was a dietitian on a college campus. So I saw some, nutrition counseling sessions there. Yeah. So that's sort of how I was introduced to it. And then from there, I got the job where I'm at right now, where I work for a dietetic private practice called Essential Nutrition in Boulder. And actually, before that, I'm sorry, I jumped. Before that, I worked for a program called PACE. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's a program for all-inclusive care for the elderly. And they have a care team. So basically, the program is for trying to empower the elderly and helping them stay in their homes while still providing all of their medical care and even their social care and their therapy treatments that they may need. And so I worked with a multidisciplinary team. We were a care team. And one of the requirements for this program is to have a dietitian on board. And that is where I was, I would help assess with, nutrition needs or at risk for malnutrition, but also a lot of one-on-one counseling with the participants. And you'd be surprised, in this population, over 60s and 70s, I did encounter people who had eating disorders, and some undiagnosed that whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
I did too. I mean, I think we connected this way too a little bit, Alex, and there's a video about Eating Disorders Don't Discriminate, and it shows an elderly woman who had beat cancer, but because of her weight loss, wouldn't gain anymore, and she ended up dying from her anorexia. Mm-hmm. And when I worked in some of the long-term care facilities, I definitely was working with people who were still wanting to watch their weight, not eating, doing a lot of supplements and chewing and spitting and things that we see in and folks of all ages who want to keep their weight down. So isn't that interesting?
It is interesting. And it's a population that we don't hear a lot about or talk a lot about, Yeah. And I think it's important to provide a space for those people to come forward and, get some help. And so with those experiences with working with people with eating disorders, once I joined this private practice, I was open to working with eating disorders. And it's a practice that we see clients for all, a wide range of topics. And so I would sit in with, the owner of the private practice, Lisa Lanzano, and other dietitians at the practice. And I sat in with them, and it was, I sat in and just listened and observed. And I dove into, Gaudiani's book and just really kind of was fascinated and interested. And as I was observing these sessions, I thought, gosh, I want to be sitting in that chair. I want to be doing this. Took lots of notes and kind of just dove right in. And that's how I got into eating disorders.
So helpful to hear you say that, because that's what it takes, doesn't it? It's really putting yourself in that situation. If you see that spark, then starting to learn, taking lots of notes, and then reading as much as you can, taking courses or whatever, but putting yourself in that space is so important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so now at the private practice, of course, you see eating disorders, but you see quite a variety of other things, correct?
That's right. That's right. So I do still quite a variety, right? So people who maybe have just been diagnosed with diabetes, or, doctors referring for that they've gotten labs back and they have high cholesterol, GI, IBS, GI issues. So it is still a wide variety. And because I work with eating disorders as well, I really think that the sessions I have with people for the other topics are so different than they would have been if I didn't work with eating disorders. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a really important point too for other dietitians who maybe aren't interested in working with eating disorders. It's not something, and that's fine, right? But learning about it, learning about the concepts, the ideas, not only can help identify people with eating disorders, right? But it can also, open up certain conversations. For example, if I'm working with someone who, we're trying to work on different lifestyle change, and we're educating on diet and how diet, is connected with a diagnosis that they've had and how it may help, right? So we might want to talk about their barriers to meal planning, right? Barriers to, time constraints, different things like that. When we talk about it, those barriers might actually sometimes be linked to experiences they had growing up. Maybe they're, not able to plan a meal because of the way that their mom or dad, planned meals and the meals that they had on the table, and they were comparing it to, they couldn't live up to that. And so it kind of, just different things like that come up, and you have to sort of see those windows and dig a little bit.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It's interesting because we just released an episode with Dr. Michaela Voss, who said that eating disorders need to be on all medical doctors' differentials. Mm-hmm. And that's what you're saying, Alex, is as a dietitian, you're working with a variety of, sports, diabetes, IBS, other things. And what you're doing, what you said, is listening. Even in that assessment, what are your barriers to meal planning, grocery shopping, whatever? You're going to hear little nuggets that allow you, whether it's high on the differential or low. We don't, as dietitians, use that terminology, but it's exactly what you're saying is keeping your radar up for, is this disordered eating based on an emotional past, or is this a full-on eating disorder?
Exactly. And those are nuggets that I wouldn't otherwise maybe have noticed, Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Abby.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it helps us frame our language. Like, we're much more gentle with how we can phrase things.
I absolutely agree. Yep. I absolutely agree. And I think people, they want to talk, they want to talk about things that they didn't even realize necessarily that they wanted to talk about, right? And they never had a place to talk about it before. The other thing too is the sessions, can be more holistic in a way, right? We really talk about emotional eating, that can come up. What is your relationship with food, right? It's interesting, as someone who considers myself, a non-diet, dietitian, I actually embrace when people have a goal of losing weight. I embrace bringing them in, I should say, because I'm excited to unpack that and really get them to understand, what really is behind that, and what really are your goals and what are your priorities, and really shifting and working on shifting that focus toward health and shifting the focus on why did we even get here as this being your goal, right? And at the end of sessions, seeing them be, feel so relieved that they didn't get handed over a meal plan and some calorie limits, right?
That's what they came for, or that's what they thought they came for.
Right. And they love that they're not leaving with that, and it's exciting that they're open to it. And I thought at first that people wouldn't be, but most people are.
I
I just had a client yesterday who was not gaslit by a doctor for one of the first times in their life and was saying, it's like she had interrupted him as he was talking about something. And he said, oh, so that's another clue. And so it's really, we're gathering up those clues instead of coming in with a preconceived notion. Here's a meal plan, and we're going to look up in whatever references we have and hand it over to them. And like you said, I really love, it's more holistic. People want to talk and they've never had a place to talk about it. How many times have we had our clients say, I never thought I would tell somebody this, but
yes.
And just reveal some of the biggest, deepest, darkest secrets that they do around food, eating, and weight.
Right. And especially when it's someone who didn't come in for eating disorder counseling, right? Or disordered eating. They weren't expecting that. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think on the flip side of that, because as a new dietitian, I was expecting, okay, I'm going to, like sprinkle my magic around. Everybody's going to love their body and be happy with food, but it's not always that way. Sometimes they want to come in and they do want that meal plan. They do want you to tell them exactly what to eat. And I'll try to like dive in a little bit to like, well, why do you think that is? And so a lot of people have their guards up, like, absolutely not. I just want the diet. So I wish it could be as perfect as that all the time, but it's not. So what do you do in those situations?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you're absolutely right. Sometimes you have those people and you can't just say no, right? I suppose I could. I suppose maybe there are some people that say, you know what, I'm not the right fit for you then, but that's just not me. I would say, okay, I'm going to work with this person, right? And I might give them what they want at first. But when they come back, I'm going to probe. How does this feel? Did you actually want? They might tell me, I was really good, right? When they use that language, I pick up on it. I was really good this week. You said good, tell me about what that means. And, I was bad or I cheated. And those are the things that I latch onto and I get them to, and I sort of expose it too. I expose the concept of, look at the way that you're talking about food. Are you open to talking about this? Look at what your ideas are. And you think you were bad because you had a piece of cake for your best friend's birthday. Can we talk about that for a second, right? Because you likely aren't going to be working with me forever. And I don't want us to leave here with you always thinking that that's bad, And so the other things, to really answer your question is I'm always asking people if they think what we're doing and working on feels like something that's sustainable. Does this feel sustainable or does this feel temporary? And this doesn't happen a lot because, to be honest, a lot of people who come to me, they've already been through the whole dieting and they're done, right? But every once in a while, it's me trying to convince them that what's best is for you to explore what's going to be the most sustainable for you, right? And just getting back to your body and the basics and hunger and fullness. And so that's how I approach it: is how is it going to be sustainable?
So, Alex, I had cake at my best friend's birthday party and that was bad. What do you tell me? How do you tell me that's not bad? It's cake.
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so many different directions you could go there. One thing that kind of pops into my head is let's analyze cake for a second. Let's do the dietitian thing for a second. And let's talk about all of the ingredients in cake, break it down, and let's talk about all of the nutrients you're getting in that cake. First of all, that would be one thing you could do. The other thing is looking at it more kind of, I guess, on a macro level is let's talk about what normal eating is. A lot of times I like to draw on Ellen Satter's definition of normal eating. I don't know if you guys ever heard of it. Yeah, I use it all the time.
Definitely.
Yeah. Let's talk about what normal eating is and whether or not you think that eating a piece of cake for your best friend's birthday would be within the realm of normal, and exploring how it feels, right? So when we think that eating cake is bad, how are we making ourselves feel about that also, right? And so if cake is bad, what else is bad? Let's talk about all the foods that are quote unquote bad.
Yeah.
And then if you're eating all of them, how often are you making yourself feel like you're bad, and tying it into that? And is it fair to yourself? And should you be making yourself, feel bad? And I think it's also about, talking about that permission to enjoy food. What does food mean to you? Is food only about fuel? Or is it also about the pleasure?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of getting into the intuitive eating principles. Yeah.
Are you finding that, so you've done this nutrition counseling for a few years now. And so are you finding that what people consider bad, quote unquote, is just following the typical diety trends?
Yes. Yes, for sure. I mean, carbs, right? It's, that's the other thing. People will come in saying, oh my gosh, I never expected to leave here with you telling me to eat more carbs. I was afraid you were going to tell me to stop. So yes, I do. I think the concept of bad is coming from the diety trends, is coming from society, coming from the messages we get from social media, but also from upbringing, from family. I do think that sometimes that, I have to remind myself to, if I have an opportunity, to bring that up too, right? What messages did you get as a kid growing up? What words did your parents or your family use to describe food? Comes from that also, I think.
Yeah. I think we have so many areas to cover as outpatient dietitians, but that touching on social media always brings up something. It's interesting to see, like all of a sudden fruit's bad now. So
yeah,
it's just wild.
Like, what?
Yeah.
I can't keep up.
I can't keep up. And I've been in the field long enough to see the trends come back around in a full circle. And back in the day, it was fat was bad. And then some people can do bacon and other people, like some people say bacon is not okay or better. And other people say, no, I'm going to put butter in my coffee. So it's kind of like, let's go back as dietitians into this world of what's human nutrition. Like our bodies haven't evolved that much since cave person time to be that different, to need coffee, butter in your coffee or not, avoid it. So I was glad too that you put in the whole piece of permission to enjoy food. So these are Alex's step 1, 2, 3 on how to handle cake. We can do the dietitian thing, which is do the science behind the individual ingredients. We can talk about normal eating and using that Ellen Satter. I mean, she has a PDF on her website that I use to help people, know, like sometimes it's munching along and sometimes it's eating 3 meals a day and sometimes it's eating. And then that brought you into the third one, permission to enjoy food, which is the intuitive eating. There's pleasure in eating. And then what if your client can't get pleasure out of eating that cake because they're so uptight about it?
That's a good point. You kind of, you asked, did you eat the cake because you felt obligated? Right. So then you want to find out, why did you eat it? Did you really not want it and you felt uncomfortable and obligated to eat it? Or did you really want it, but then you were so uncomfortable and felt guilty? Yeah. So what was it? Let's really get down to it. And so most of the time, it would be, I did want it. It looked really good, but that voice was telling me, you don't need it. Do you need it? Right. So the other thing too would be drawing on a time in their life when they did enjoy cake.
I love this one.
Yeah.
Do you have any examples of what people have said or what they've revealed to themselves with that experiment?
Sure. They always get back to childhood, right? They remember their kind of elementary school, middle school days when they couldn't wait for birthday parties, or, snacking after school comes up a lot in my sessions, that memory. And I have very vivid memories of that too. You come home from school and you're so hungry, right? And so a lot of that comes up too. And that freedom where you're not even thinking, you're just going off of your hunger, your body's cues. Your body is just moving you toward that cupboard and moving you toward that fridge, and you just enjoyed it. And so we kind of do that. I'll do an exercise on that. Did you ever have a time where you did enjoy it? And I haven't come across someone who says, no. And certainly, when we say cake, that could mean any number of foods, right? Because you certainly could be someone who just doesn't like cake, and that's not, yeah.
And that's what I was going to say, along with Abby's question about, like, do you see that that's the same foods? Like, for some people, so I'm in Kansas City, barbecue is a big deal. Mm-hmm. Barbecue is also, for people who are dieting, can be really, quote, bad. Yeah. And for other clients, it's not. It's actually a go-to common, like, okay, very, very okay food. And so that's part of that countertransference that we might project onto our client, that cake is a scary food for them, or that barbecue may be a scary food for them. So it's being open to, and Alex, this is what I really love about you, is you're listening. You're giving them a place to tell the story, a place to talk about it. And I haven't heard you yet say, kind of guiding them towards what you think the answer should be. It's really, you're just like, tell me about a time when you did enjoy that, or let's talk about that cake. Did you want that cake, or did you feel obligated, or was there something else? It's really open, kind of going along with motivational interviewing and kind of keeping that open.
Yeah. And getting to the bottom of what you really want, not your thoughts, not that eating disordered brain or whatever you want. There's lots of different ways that we could name that, right? Which is a whole other topic, but, but what do you want, right? And they don't always know at first. And it's kind of figuring out I want to hear your voice. I want that pure voice. I want us to kind of, get back into what you want, what your body wants. And that them kind of figuring that out, not what I want. And on the flip of all of this, sometimes I think, as eating disorder dietitians, we can villainize other types of foods that are sort of quote unquote health foods, like kale or quinoa or whatever it may be, right? Like, no, eat the pasta, not the quinoa. Eat the, I don't know, don't eat too many veggies, that sort of thing. I think we need to be a little careful about that as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you said that, because we can go, have you ever heard the phrase from diet land to donut land and back?
No, I haven't. That's
okay.
Great. Yeah.
So and I forget, it's someone from the Health at Every Size, Deborah Gard, and I apologize if anyone wants to let me know who that is, but I love that phrase, because like kale, what if you're in the mood for that? And what if you really want it? Exactly. What if it's the only thing that you have? Or, that kind of goes along with veganism. We have to be available and open to what is right for our client. And while we tease out maybe some of the eating disorder type of choices.
Exactly. Some people, love those foods. Some people love kale, love green smoothies, and the vegan thing too is right. That concept of really listening. I mean, someone might really deeply care about the compassion piece and really identify with the vegan movement for animals, maybe not necessarily for health. And, it is our job to really help them tease that out and not to let people get away with using it sort of as an excuse, right, for continuing eating disorder behavior. But at the same time, yes, I do think there's a place for having those kinds of ideals and diets and having a successful recovery. I think there's a place for it. You can eat Cheetos and a kale smoothie at the same time, right? Yeah.
Somebody, I don't know who it is that says this. So somebody says something like, it's the dose of the poison, like, everything in moderation. If you have 200 bags of Cheetos every day, maybe not a great idea, but with you. Yeah. So shifting gears a little bit, I would love for you to touch on this, because I'm hoping at least that we have some newer RDs listening in, or people finishing up their internship that are curious about what field to get in. So pros and cons maybe of outpatient counseling, because I love outpatient, but seeing, at like inpatient eating disorder facilities, all of the support and how you can just walk over and talk to the doctor. You don't have to try and find their number and then leave a voicemail and then email back and forth. So just giving a little bit of insight on that.
That is a great question. Yeah. I think you just sort of named the cons, right, of being outpatient. I would agree with that. You might have more resources at your fingertips, right, which is great. People resources, right, other professionals. You're more likely to work in that multidisciplinary team. Yeah, so that's definitely the benefit there. And the safety of knowing that your clients have medical oversight. That's something too that you miss in an outpatient setting. I think the pros to an outpatient setting, and not having worked in an inpatient setting, right? So this is someone who hasn't, but I think the pros too are, gosh, there are so many people out there who are so reluctant to get care, right? To see a professional about their eating disorder or their disordered eating, right? And they're willing to step into an office. So I love that I can be that maybe stepping stone for them, or maybe that's where they stop. You hope if they need a higher level of care, you can help get them there. But so at least I'm there to help support that population. Right. And I think you can think a little bit more. Another pro would be you can think a little bit more outside the box, right? You don't have to follow this prescribed program, follow certain steps. You can adapt based on, what your intuition is telling you about the clients. I think we've talked about it before, Beth, in our group supervisions is there a time where you kind of hold back? I've asked myself recently, is there a time where I need to kind of pause on food challenges, right? And action items. Maybe we pause for a couple of sessions because that's what seems right. Things like that. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, absolutely. That was very helpful.
And that was a great question, Abby, because I've been in all places. And I started in eating disorders with an inpatient hospitalization. So it was medical stabilization and inpatient in a hospital setting. So yeah, you're there, you're doing groups, they're monitored, the doors are locked before, after meals. There's a staff member with them at every meal to help. And like you can go to their chart and see what their weight is. And they've been weighed in the same clothing, and all of that is very, very wonderful. And then when I did my first outpatient, it was like, I know nothing about eating disorders. I know nothing. I felt like I knew nothing. And so it was kind of that outpatient, like getting to learn how to, like you said, Alex, kind of get that pause of, I'm only with them for 1 hour a week.
Right.
They've got 21 meals and however many snacks and exercise hours in between, and abilities to purge or not. And I don't have that kind of control. What do you do?
Yeah.
But you have the freedom then to hold space for that. You also, your schedule, you can be there at different times for them and take Fridays off if you want to, and really work with your client. That's some of the benefits of, I think, being an outpatient. I agree. Yes, I do. And being in a group practice, I think for both of you, you have people that you can talk to, Yeah. Oh gosh. I've learned so much from the girls in my group. We learn so much from each other, and it's so helpful. Yeah. To work in a group practice for sure. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I'm doing supervision with Beth right now, and that is fabulous. I'm adoring it. But it's being in private practice and having other people around you is so nice, because if I'm freaking out a little bit, I can just walk over to someone's office, explain, calm down a little bit. So that's always a great perk too.
I mean, what would be some freaking out things that you all might in your practices want to share with somebody new who's saying, what am I doing wrong? And it's like that you've learned that if I just go talk to someone,
Oh, this sounds like a you question, Alex, because I still freak out all the time.
Yeah. Oh, I still freak out here and there too. I think, gosh, what comes to mind for me, to be honest, is, I know in the podcast you've talked about, right, being for us as dietitians to have awareness, around the therapy piece of things and to have awareness around the medical stuff. And I think when it comes down to the medical is I have in the past panicked with, oh my gosh, someone just came in, and I kind of did my thing with, we went through food recalls and meal plans and how to increase what they're eating. And I don't think I paused on how severe the situation is here. Right. And that kind of ties into being in that outpatient setting. I don't know if I think maybe the first step, and now that is when I'm sort of the first person someone's come to, if it's not them transitioning out of, inpatient, now often it's, the first step that I recommend is some medical oversight, go see a doctor, make sure outpatient is appropriate. So I think that might be one thing, is knowing the signs, making sure that we're doing assessments appropriately and knowing the signs of someone who might be too severe to just jump right into some kind of outpatient program, So that is kind of the biggest thing, that comes to mind. Other things, making sure that you use appropriate language, right? Not to be too offensive. So I found sometimes in the beginning, I would hold back a lot because I would be thinking in my head, oh my gosh, I'm about to say this word. Is this word okay? Is that word okay? Kind of not the language and the lingo and not wanting to offend and wanting it to be a really safe space for that person.
Yes. Language, lingo, healthy, unhealthy, good, bad. Can you use the word fat? Can you use the word fat as a food? Can you use the word fat on body? Can you use even the word eating disorder?
My thing was the facial expressions of myself. Like on the inside, I'm freaking out. And it took me a little bit to just like, okay, no reaction.
This is happening.
Everything's fine.
This is happening.
Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You have that little inner dialogue with yourself, don't you? When you're in there, you're kind of on, right? And I think it's helpful because I do think in some ways, I think, okay, it's like this little performance that you put on every time and not thinking of it that way. I think it's helpful. It's like, wait a second, it doesn't have to be that way. And that's how I feel that I've calmed down a bit. Where no, it's not me performing. It's me sitting in a room with another human.
Yes. Yeah. Because sometimes we can't control what comes on our face. And it really can be, like you said, knowing the language, and sometimes with different cultures or genders and identities, that we don't have to say we're sorry. We really just have to read what is happening in our client's body language and then say, I noticed something, a shift. Did I say something that affected you? And so that way we get to learn about that person, because we don't know what their safe words are or how their perspective is until we open it up.
That's right. So asking, simply asking, if you're not sure, ask, or just let them know in the beginning. If there's anything I say that is offensive to you, please let me know,
Yeah, words can be powerful.
Absolutely.
You have such a calming presence, like the both of you. I'm just sitting here like, oh, I can't wait till I'm like 10 more years into this. And I'm just so much calmer.
Abby, you have only been in this, you've only been a registered dietitian for 1 year.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yes. So you're learning a lot, and you kind of got thrown into this because I asked you if you wanted to be my co-host for this podcast because I wanted someone new. So you're really, and Alex, how long have you been practicing as a dietitian?
Yes. So for me, it's been 6.5 years. I'm pretty new myself. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, speaking of, if you were to take yourself back to entering the field of eating disorders, what do you wish you would have known then that you do know now? And take your time if you need to.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a loaded question, right? I think I wish I would have known at the time sort of how important and powerful the basics are. I guess. Again, kind of going back to that performing, right? Wanting to kind of give them all these bells and whistles, understanding that we can't assume what other people know, and how helpful just getting down to the basics. And what I mean too could be simply, a balanced meal. And let's talk about that. And let's talk about what that means. And let's talk about macronutrients and how they fuel you. And do you know what macronutrients even means? And let's talk about, that. And so that's something I have learned, is just kind of sitting, pausing, slowing down. And the basics for you are very meaningful to other people, and can't assume that they know them. So start with that, lead with that.
I love that. And I can't, we could have a whole episode on that, because I just finished a trauma-informed dietetics course, and thinking about just the rabbit holes that people can get themselves into to keep themselves feeling safe. That's the big word, but how important and powerful the basics are. One of the things in that course that I learned was, when you find yourself going into the psychoeducation, like the education mode, that it may be because you're not sitting in with just the basics. Like, what's human nutrition? We all have that. We have a lot of that. We have more of that than any other profession in the healthcare world. So rely on those basics and keep coming back to that and reflecting it back to what your client is asking. So I love that, Alex. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So great to have you on and learn from you, Alex. And we would love to have you back eventually.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure. Yes, I could just sit and talk to you gals for hours.
Let's lean on each other and learn from each other so we can grow together as professionals in this field of eating disorders. If you want to connect with me for supervision or membership with monthly content, please find me at bethharrell.com/professionals.